everyone and welcome back to the workshop. And in today's video you can probably tell what we're going to be doing, and it is finishing off the fire engine bonnet. You'll probably see where we left off on this, where we kind of finished up, and since then I have had some handles cast for this because they were quite unique, weren't really off-the-shelf brass handles that we could get. And we've also had discussions with the customer on how we're going to be finishing it up before handing it back to them, as well as another piece of the puzzle to go together is they actually want the front wings completely finished off. Whereas before I just made up the inner wings, now it's down to me to finish off the front wings completely, including all the brassware, all the actual outer edge, rolling all that up, welding it all together the same way it would be made. So basically here we are with the bonnet as it was where we finished up before, still looking like a Slipknot member, but we'll be getting all these Cleco tabs out when we're riveting together, but we also want to get it into a red oxide primer for them to paint on top of, because that is how they actually want it handed back to them, all primered up, and also the trim all riveted on, so they will be finishing it off from there in the paint shop with the rest of the truck. So to get a start on now, I'm going to mark up the handles and going to basically get those drilled up. I'll even show you around them because they are a work of art just in themselves, these handles. Done a real nice job of casting those, and the finish on them is just, yeah, it's really going to fit well with this bonnet. So if you want to see how it's done, stick around and find out. One of the first steps I need to get done and out the way, which I didn't do in the last video, is I need to fit 2 locating pins in the front and the rear of the bonnet. So the last piece, you know, the old hinge that you may have seen, this is one of the locating pins. They are riveted in place from what I can see, and there is no way I'm going to get that out, and even if I did, it's not going to be usable. So that actually looks like it's made of steel, but the whole of that hinge top section there is actually brass once you actually clean it up. So I'm going to actually make the locating pins out of brass to then almost have them as a riveting style. So I'll have some excess material in there that I can flare out, but the center of the pin will be the right size to locate in, with the extra material hammered over to flare out, and I'll be using this bit of solid brass bar here. So once I get that in the lathe, turned down to size, I'll have a bit of excess where it can actually pass through either from the top or the bottom, whichever way is going to round off better. I may even do a couple test pieces, but I'm going to step these down, drill the holes through there, and then get them actually riveted in place by making this piece the rivet. Well, let's look at these beauties here. So there we go, look at those beautiful brass handles. So these are a solid cast brass handle. They're actually made from a 3D scan, which was then turned into a 3D print. That print was then used as a kind of mold to then do the casting off of. So I've got 4 of those in here, but as you may be able to see, I haven't actually got the 3 holes drilled in either end. That is essential to match up with what we got on the original handles on the other bonnet, and also how it's going to be mounted. So I'm going to mark those up on the back and then drill so they're all consistent throughout, but then I'll have to mark up and see where they land on there. Same reference as the other bonnet, get them all evenly spaced, whether that's in reference to the bonnet or the rivets, no, or the louvers. Sorry. But yeah, I'm looking forward to getting these on there. Already got my grubby mitts all over them, so they're not as shiny as they should be. but I do really like those. I'm really happy how they turned out. Excited to get them on there and see how they look. Right, I've now got the holes marked up into the handles. Now I need to actually transfer those holes onto the side panels. As you can see, I've got the square on there already. I'm going to start measuring and marking the first hole so I can then lay all the handles on. I've got them all labelled to which side they're going on, which position. And then that means I can start drilling the holes, and then I can actually hang these in place and potentially even hold them in place with the rivets, and we'll get a good idea of how they're going to look. Never felt the same. We're a little taller, bolder. Okay, so now I'm going to move over to the front wings, because as you can see over there, I've got the handles clecoed in place on the bonnet. I've got the inner wing already made up on this, so the inner section, and we've been given the go-ahead to make the rest of the wing for the customer. So I'm just going to cut down a section of steel so I can join these two together, and I'm going to do that by just bending a section of flat steel around and laying it over the top of this. That way we're going to know how much we're going to have to cut off, whether it be on the fresh steel we're going to put down, or we're going to be trimming down the inner section of the wing. I'll then cleco them together. I'll then use the cleco tabs after I've scribed the line to then trim off the excess. And then that'll give us the perfect setup to lay some tacks and then do a full butt weld the whole length. Right, let's get to it. As you can now see, I've got all the clecos in place, so the two panels are overlapping now. But before I do the cut line, or do any cutting, or even the scribing, what I want to do now is actually put some more clecos in there. And the reason for that is so I can have these cleco tabs in place. So these little cleco tabs accept 4 clecos, and they've got a little hole in the middle, so you can either put a tack in there, or you can check how it's all lined up. But what this does is, by having these 4, it means we can hold the panel square in place, and as we cut along, we know that they are going to be in the exact same place when it's held back together. The difference between these and the butt weld clamps is that when you use a butt weld clamp, you end up clamping the fin that actually goes through the panel from TIG welding, or even happens in MIG welding when the metal shrinks and ends up clamping it in there. But with these, it means you can get a nice tight fit with the edge to edge and almost fusion weld it together if that's what you do. But it means we can properly line them up, and then we know they're going to go in the exact same place. And the reason we're going to use actual tabs that are laser cut, that are produced to all be the same, is mean we're not going to get any of these confused along the way. Previously I've used actual kind of offcuts, just drilled the holes in, and then the problem with that is every tab you end up making, you have to remember exactly where it goes, because you're going to have your drill holes, the holes you drilled, slightly off, and there's going to be slightly different gaps between the holes, and it ends up just causing a whole load of issues. Save yourself the peace of mind, and save yourself the stress, give yourself some peace of mind, and just get a set of these. They are an absolute lifesaver. There's times I won't even do a job if I won't carry on a job because I've ran out of these, and I know it's not worth the hassle continuing until I get more. So yeah, absolutely brilliant. I got these from Steve at Old Bones Fabrication. Get in contact with them if you want to get yourself a set. They also supply the Clecos, so you can get a whole number of these as well. Head on over, get yourself some. Okay, as you can now see, I've got the two pieces tacked together. I actually tacked all these together with the Cleco tabs in place, because having those in place while tacking it shows that you're really able to get that tight gap all the way along, and this gap is tight. So all those extra tacks in there really helps fight against any distortion in the more flat piece. So I'd say that it's describe this as more of a flat panel, even though it is curved around, but it's not a compound curve like the inside edge. With this inside edge being a compound curve, it holds a lot more structure than the flatter piece, and they will basically want to fight against each other with heat distortion as you go along. Having these two together now, I didn't have to do much hammering or stretching on the tacks to really get them to level up together. The Cleco tabs done their job and basically held everything together along the way. So now it is ready for me to weld completely together, and then after that we'll dress it off. Right, I've got the wing welded up now. I've just taken the head of the weld off there, just taken the crown with a file. Now moving over to the planishing hammer. This is a tool that I made, I think, at the beginning of last year. Haven't really used it a great deal. A lot of my shaping I do either on the power hammer there, or I do on the English wheel, but because this thing is loud. I'll be definitely wearing these things for it. But I fabricated it out of a few different laser cut pieces, and the idea was to make it look like a traditional cast style, but it's definitely rigid enough. It can really put some hammering into some panels, and I've even burst aluminium on it, so it definitely does the job. It's all foot operated, so it means I've got both hands free while I'm working away, and I've got a variety of dies I can put in there too, different radiuses. And I mainly use this if I do need to get in something that's had a bit of heat distortion in there. I'd rather use this for that kind of work other than the English wheel. This one I just kind of use to just beat the death out of anything. So let's get to it. I'll put these earplugs in, start making some noise. Okay, so now that I've got the weld all planished out over on the planishing hammer, I then taken the top of the weld off with a file to then get it back down to the metal that I want it to be level with. After that, I've gone over with a dusting of satin black spray paint because I can then use that as a guide coat to find all my low spots and high spots after chasing over with the body file. So I'll just go over that now with little spoon and dolly, just to bring those low spots up, chasing over the areas, back over the file, and then that will make all these dark sections disappear and become level with the rest of the metalwork. So it's a bit of a long procedure, but we'll get there. Back to it. Okay, so now that I've got the front wings how I want them, got them dressed off, hammered and smoothed out, I'm going to be moving over to the brass trim that's going to be laying on them. So this brass is a slightly different shape to what we had in the bonnet. It's flatter, but it is also wider. And the issue with this as well, I'm actually going to have to be curving it kind of the flat way around, putting a 90 in there with a gentle radius for the front edge of the wing. The issue with that is I am going to have to put some heat in there, and it's going to be a bit tricky to get that even radius, so I've got to be very careful with it and try not to get the thing to cool down too quick, because these have brass has a tendency of hardening when it cools down, and for me to then change that later on, it's going to be a lot harder for me to kind of anneal the brass or manipulate it round the way I want it to. So I'm going to go slow and steady on this, not too much pressure. Going to do evenly either side of the brass for the bend on it. But this is only for this bend. The rest of them can all be done by hand and quite nicely. But have to kind of spread the heat evenly across long ways and sideways, because sideways will stop it from cracking as I form it round or crumpling up on the inside. And then long ways will actually stop it from kinking in a certain spot. So we'll be moving on to that now. And to do that, I've actually already set up the dolly and the guide as such on the table. So I'm just going to use a torch while I form it round. It's an old dolly, so don't worry for all those panel beaters that'll be crying. I'll be forming it around there and then just trying to tap down at quite low pressure to not cause any divots or any dents in there, and then we'll get laying on the wings. Right, so as you can now see, I've got all the brass trim laid up and bent round on the front wings, and I've even actually got round to bending up the brass trim for the rear wings there. You wouldn't have seen me make those. Those are actually done by Lee Payne. He's done a great job on those. But laying down the brass was a bit of an awkward one on that, because there is a lot that goes into it. That actually wraps from the back all the way to the front, and then round and then back over. I couldn't actually get a full length of, make it out of one full length, because the actual outside radius is longer than that. So I've actually made it out of 2 pieces and then hidden it on the inside join, which is actually just going to be hidden under the inside edge of the body there. So the way that all wraps around, got those dialed in, very finicky, even had to make some kind of guides to make sure they landed accurately on where the front edge curves around. So now all the brass trim is laid on, so that's basically metal side done, which is quite a lot of work, as you've probably seen over these few videos. So the only thing to do now, basically before handing back to the customer, it does all need to be riveted together, but I need to get this all in primer. So now that it's all assembled, it all has to come apart again. So we'll get to that now. Okay, so now that I've got all the panels stripped apart, so all the steel work is now been DA'd and in primer, and now moving over to the brass work. So as you can see, it's all quite dull at the moment because it is all basically raw. I've just trimmed to shape and put the holes where they need to be. But I do need to brighten them up, because where the handles were cast, they've got a really nice finish on them. If you look at the difference there, you know, that's a dull gold colour, or we want it to be that colour, so it really pops when it's on there. So I'm going to do all that before actually riveting it on, because when they're riveted on, it means I only have to kind of address the areas where the rivets are. Whereas if I was to polish these in place, I'd end up digging into the primer, you know, fighting against all the metal that's there. Whereas this, I've got full range, twisting round, and really be able to work it in the polisher instead of doing it all by hand. It's going to be a lot more efficient that way. But let's start the process and see the big difference at the end. Right, I've got all the panels painted up now. They're all in the red oxide, and I've now got all the brassware all polished up, which was a mammoth task in itself. Especially these huge sections you see here, where they actually go on the rear wings and bend all the way around. Trying to get those in the polisher without getting it bound up was quite a task in itself. But it's now time to cleco it all back in place, and then we can start laying down the rivets, getting those in, and then it will start to all take shape, and then we'll see what the final product is going to look like. Okay everyone, there we have it. We have got everything now assembled. I've gone through everything, riveted all together. As you can see, all the handles, all the extra bits are now all in place and it is ready to go back to the customer. I've even gone round and where all the rivets come through, all the brass trimware there, I've actually dressed off the excess and then polished all the heads of the rivets as they go through. So it means it's not a job they have to do now. That covers all of that section. The customer's really happy with it, which is always great to hear. But the bonus about all of this is that it's actually going to be joined up with the wooden coachwork, which is getting carried out by Adam Potts. He's been doing that in the background and he's really going in depth with it. So it's going to be interesting to see how it all combines together and with his craftsmanship, and then hopefully what these pieces looking good, if I don't, say so myself. It should be something interesting to follow along, and I'm going to try and keep pictures along the way of any progress that happens and as it gradually comes together. But yeah, the customer's super happy with it. He's actually coming down today to have a look at all. But I hope you all enjoyed this video on what goes into a task like this to basically be recreating something that didn't exist before as such, and basically the amount of detail that go into it using different materials, different techniques, and end up getting it all buttoned up and what it kind of looks like as it goes back to the customer. So I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope to see you in the next video, and I'll see you then.